Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Reborn Muslim, the podcast by and for reverts to Islam. I'm your host Avalon, and today I want to talk about something that's just recently been on my mind. So, a lot of the topics that I think of for this podcast and for the content I make on Instagram and YouTube come from content that I see on mostly Instagram. I'll see things, whether it be from Muslims or non Muslims, that just kind of trigger an idea in my mind, and I want to talk about it. And that's the case for today. So I think the easiest way to open up this topic would just be to give you the example that I saw on Instagram, which prompted me to think about all of this. And another example of something very similar that I saw on Instagram maybe like a year ago. And then let's talk about it from there. So, Bismillah. The thing I saw today, it was literally just a few hours ago, was a video from one of those like Instagram couples, and they seem like a sweet couple, mashallah, don't get me wrong. However, the video itself is what kind of uh, clued me into a bigger issue that I've seen a lot. So, in the video, the couple was, I think they're on vacation, they were at a pool, like at a hotel, and the wife was wearing a bikini. And her husband was saying, as a joke, like it was meant to be a joke, he was telling her, "Can you cover up?" Like he kept saying, like, "Can you please cover up? Like this is a little ridiculous. Like, can you cover up, please?" And they're not Muslim. They're just like, typical like Western couple. And she was like really shocked at first. She like didn't even know what to say. And then finally she said, "Well, why don't you cover up? You don't have a shirt on." Like, and she wasn't like genuinely mad. She was kind of more saying it as a joke because I think she could tell. I mean, I feel like those videos are all staged anyways. But yeah, that's what she said. And of course the comments were just, yes, like queen, like tell him he should cover up, like just completely like on her side. And the only negative comment I could really come across was actually saying that it was sexist for them to even make the joke that she should cover up. So pretty much like just thousands of people thought this was really funny and agreed with her. So the other video I saw, which was a long time ago, which is related and kind of coming from the opposite perspective, you could say, was from a woman. So the woman was like, I guess, pranking her husband. So same kind of situation, but also sort of the opposite because in this situation, the couple was in a home. I don't know if it was theirs, but they're in some house that was like very open. Like the windows were just open, the doors were open. It was like literally anyone passing through or in a nearby house would be able to see right through and see them. And the woman was topless. Like she had indicated that obviously she wasn't showing it, but she had like taken her entire like shirt and bra off. Like she was naked on top. And she was just filming her husband's reaction to her being that way in this house where literally anybody like anywhere nearby would be able to see in and see her that way. And from what I remember, again, it was a while ago that I saw this video. I don't remember him freaking out whatsoever. I think he was very measured considering the situation. And again, who knows? Maybe she wasn't even naked. But in the video, what I remember was he was just kind of like, "Hey, like, why are you doing that? Like, can you not do that, please?" And she was just trying to joke around and play it off like it was normal. And he was just obviously like uncomfortable, but not throwing a fit, not yelling or anything like that, just like clearly uncomfortable. And I remember the comments on there were the opposite of the comments that I just described from the post I saw today. The comments on that video were like, "Your husband is toxic," or boyfriend, whoever it is. "He's toxic. You need to dump him. You shouldn't be with him. He's trying to control you. Like, he's toxic." That's what I kept seeing. "Dump him. He's toxic." And that really strikes me. That's very profound to me, the place that we've gotten to as a society. I see this all the time that we've gotten to a place where men expecting their wives to dress a certain way and to cover themselves in a certain way is seen as toxic. So, of course, the hijab in general is seen as toxic by the West. Anything like that, where it's an obvious violation, it's a boundary that should not be crossed, it's seen as toxic now to enforce those boundaries, or not even enforce, just like say, "Hey, like, I'm not comfortable with you doing that." Or I'm not comfortable with, I'm not comfortable with you spending time with somebody of the opposite sex alone. Or I'm not comfortable with you dressing this way. Or for the example of the second video I mentioned, I'm not comfortable with you exposing yourself to literally anybody who could be passing by and seeing you. And it's crazy because these things are not toxic. Like, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say the stance that these things are toxic, the opinion that they're toxic is just wrong. And like in most things, I think people can have their own opinion and they can just do things the way they want. And of course they can. Everybody can do whatever they want. However, to say that not wanting your spouse to reveal themselves or having standards for your spouse, your husband or wife is toxic, no, I'm just going to have to disagree with you. And that's what brings me back to Islam. That's why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast, because in Islam, the thing is, we don't ignore these obvious triggers, these things that make us feel jealous as a partner, as a spouse. We don't ignore them. We actually address them head on and make rules and regulations and guidelines in order to properly deal with them and properly rein them in instead of letting them get out of hand. And that's the beauty of Islam, is that it's timeless. It gives us these specific guidelines to follow. And it's like, if you follow these set of rules, these set of suggestions for you and your spouse, I guarantee you things are going to be much better. And again, it stood the test of time. These are timeless rules. They applied 1,400 years ago when Islam came down, and they apply today, even now. I really think what the issue is that we have now gotten to a place where we are denying our basic human emotions and feelings, because that's just a normal feeling. Like, just be real with yourself and be real with your spouse. Like, it is perfectly normal to feel jealous. Any normal guy, like I'm telling you, like if you just get a random guy off the street and ask him, how do you feel when you're with your wife out in public and she's wearing a bikini, a lot of cleavage, and just like everything is highlighted, all parts of her body are highlighted, and you ask him how he feels, I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 just normal people, not weirdos, like literally normal guys, are going to say, yeah, I don't feel great. I feel a little embarrassed. I feel a little self-conscious. I feel a little jealous and uncomfortable. I don't like seeing guys look at her. If he's being real with himself, that's what he would say. And on the other hand, if you ask any normal woman off the street, how do you feel or how would you feel if your husband told you, hey, I'm going to go hang out with my friend who's a girl alone? We're just going to go hang out together. If you asked her genuinely, how would you feel in that situation? Embarrassed, uncomfortable, unsettled, upset, jealous. She would feel the same way. So it's not this issue of like men trying to control women. Of course, that happens and it can be taken to an extreme. However, a man not wanting his wife to reveal herself, being seen as extreme, that's extreme. That's crazy to me. That is perfectly normal to not want your wife to dress that way. It is perfectly normal for you not want your husband to spend time with women alone. That's just a basic human impulse. But as I already mentioned, we've gotten to this place in our society nowadays where basic human emotions like jealousy in a relationship are being denied. Like, you're being called toxic if you have these literal basic human emotions. And that brings me back to the first video I mentioned, the one that I saw literally just a few hours ago. Because in the video, yes, it was supposed to be a joke, right? Like, the whole point of the video is like he's recording it. He just wanted to see her reaction. Like, it's supposed to be a joke. Okay, fine. But we all know that old saying, okay, there's always a little truth in every joke. Even if it was meant to be a joke and it was, oh, there's nothing serious about it, there's always a little bit of truth. And I think that is definitely a true statement. And I think that's definitely the case with this video specifically. Because, yeah, he might have been saying it as a joke, but at the end of the day, the reality is his wife was there in front of other people in the pool and revealing clothing, or not really even clothing, like undergarments. And that's another thing. Like, we think it's so inappropriate to see a woman in her bra and underwear, or I mean, we used to, at least. Like, that would be seen as not normal, or be like, oh no, like, sorry, I accidentally walked in on you. But wearing a bikini, it's exactly the same thing. And if not, like, even more revealing. But that's seen as perfectly normal. It's very strange to me. But, anyways, clearly, like, even if it was meant as a joke, it still irked him a little bit to see her that way. I don't think he would have made that joke if he didn't feel a little bit like that deep down. So this just goes to the point that it's human nature. Literally no normal person is going to feel awesome about their spouse revealing themselves to another person. And I think with men, it's more so like a physical or, visual thing where they wouldn't feel great with their wife exposing her body to other men in that way. And with women, it might be more of like an emotional thing. And I think it goes both ways for both genders. But I think, especially with women, it's more of an emotional thing where we are very uncomfortable, of course, with our husband spending time with another female alone. That's not his family. It's not something like that, just like some friend of his that he's spending time with alone. Because when we're married, we have that alone time together. And you can hang out with your friends of the same gender. There's nothing wrong with that. And hanging out with a group is one situation. But to hang out with someone of the opposite sex alone and to say that that's perfectly normal and it's weird if you don't let your partner do that, you guys, you got to stop denying your basic human emotions. And I think when I say that, people might think, oh, well, then if you just, listen to all your human impulses, then you'll just be like an animal. Like you'll just, not even be able to control yourself and just be this toxic person and be overcome by your feelings. But that's again where Islam comes into play, because once again, instead of just denying human nature, instead of trying to force ourselves into this little box of saying, no, 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 I don't feel that way. No, I feel great when men look at my wife's boobs. Like, I'm sorry, that's not normal. Or like, no, I feel great when I see my husband hanging out with another woman alone and doing God knows what in somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, that feels fine for me. I don't feel jealous at all. Like, y'all, you can stop lying to yourself. It's okay. It's okay to feel jealous. It's actually very, very normal. It's literally in our DNA as humans, it's human nature. So instead of denying it and letting it build and build and build and then explode, because we see that happen. Honestly, I know it seems extreme, but we do see instances where spouses lose it. After years and years of this, they end up losing it and end up actually killing their spouse or killing someone else who is involved with their spouse or whatever it might be. And that's not to say that that's an appropriate reaction. Obviously, it's not. It's never appropriate to bring violence into it, let alone to take someone's life. However, I'm just saying that is like an extreme effect of this building and building and building over time, because that's what happens when you deny yourself over and over and over of something that's perfectly normal and there's nothing wrong with it. To deny it over and over and pretend like it's not there and make yourself feel bad for feeling that way, it's going to mess with your psyche. It's going to make you do things that you regret, and it's going to make you someone that you don't want to be. I promise you, over time, that is going to mess with you. So, in Islam, we know that. We know that we don't feel good when our spouse is alone with somebody of the opposite sex. We know that it's embarrassing, that it's humiliating for our spouse to see that. We know that we don't want people of the opposite sex looking at our spouse sexually, and our spouse playing into that by wearing clothes that, invite stares. And of course, again, men are always responsible for their gaze. Number one, that's their responsibility. However, as women, we also are responsible for our modesty. Like it's equally on both of us, okay? So in Islam, again, we know that and we put regulations on it, we put rules on it. You're not supposed to spend time alone with somebody of the opposite sex that you're not married to. You're not supposed to do that. In fact, we even say that if a man and a woman are alone together, of course they're not married, they're never really alone, because the third person is just shaitan. That's a pretty bold statement. And it's true though. I think anybody who's in a relationship or marriage can say, yeah, that is true. That's why we have modesty. Men are supposed to dress a certain way. Men shouldn't be wearing tight pants, and they need to cover from their navel to their knees. And very importantly, they need to lower their gaze. They need to not be staring at other women, etc. And women, in turn, should also be covering themselves. They should be wearing modest clothing, loose clothing, covering their hair. These are rules and regulations that we put in place because we know these things happen. Instead of denying it and pretending everything is perfectly normal and it's toxic to feel these basic instincts, we address it head on and put these rules in place. And that's the reason that Islam is honestly the solution to everything, in my opinion. I really do feel that way, because if we actually followed Islam the way we're supposed to follow it, not the way people manipulate it for their own political and financial agendas, if we followed it the way it's meant to be followed, we wouldn't have a lot of the issues we see in the world, honestly. And just to bring in another example, another video I saw, there's one that I saw very recently as well. I think it was like yesterday, and it was very related. So as I mentioned, we, talk about now that, oh, it's toxic if you don't let your husband or wife hang out with someone of the opposite sex. Well, I saw this TikTok posted somewhere, and it was this guy hanging out with a woman, and he said, oh, like when you finally are able to hang out with your girl best friend, like when your wife finally allows you to hang out with your girl best friend. And he was standing facing the camera, and her like legs were up on his shoulders and her head was like behind him. Like he was like holding her upside down, but like her legs were literally up on his shoulders. It was immensely inappropriate. Like I watched it and got secondhand embarrassment for his wife. Honestly, it was extremely embarrassing for her. I felt so bad for her. I would be so ashamed to see that. Because first of all, it's like, it's just so strange to me. People will say, "Oh, it's so toxic and forceful to tell your wife that you're not comfortable with her wearing certain things and that you have these standards for what you would prefer her to wear." That's toxic and forceful. And yet this guy clearly asking his wife repeatedly to do something that she was not comfortable with for good reason is not toxic. That's not forceful, because the way he captioned it or the way he like phrased it was, when your wife finally lets you hang out with your girl best friend alone. So he obviously was pushing her over and over, and then she finally gave in. That's not forceful. Come on, that is like, people, that's toxic. That's forceful. That's not okay. And it's crazy because he was pushing her in the opposite direction. He wasn't pushing her towards, can you be more modest so that we don't have these conflicts? We don't have, people coming between us. He was pushing for, please let people come between us. Please let me hang out with this girl alone. It doesn't matter if it's his girl best friend. That's inappropriate. That's not his wife. And then to go on posting this video of her basically like straddling his shoulders, being in the most inappropriate position I could possibly imagine. And the crazy bit of it is that's what they posted on the internet for everyone on the planet to see. And to publicly embarrass his wife like that and just publicly shame her, even though he saw it as like a funny little video, that is unbearably embarrassing. That is just shameful to do that to your wife. The way they were touching each other was so incredibly inappropriate. And to think that's what they did on camera and posted for the whole world to see, only God knows what they were doing with the camera off. If they felt emboldened to post that and they thought that was funny and cute and just like fine to post, I don't even want to know what they were doing when they weren't recording. I would be horrified if I was his wife and I saw that. I would be horrified if my husband was even asking to hang out with his quote unquote girl best friend over and over and over, period. Even one time I would be like, what? And let alone if he's asking over and over and over, I would be so put off by that, to the point of like, I think I might need to reevaluate this because clearly you don't have respect for my boundaries as your partner. And yet to then for her to give in and finally say yes, and then for him to go and post that, it just shows you what happens when when we deny our human nature and when we say these things are toxic. It's toxic to feel jealous at all. And jealousy can be toxic. Don't get me wrong. Jealousy can get to a toxic place where, you're uncomfortable with your wife even having male coworkers or even going to the masjid because there's men there. At that point, it's like, okay, well, she can't even leave the house if if that's the restrictions you're putting on her because there's men everywhere. That's not okay, and vice versa with a woman not wanting her husband to, even go to work because there's women there. That kind of jealousy is terrible. And the jealousy where it becomes violent or becomes abusive, emotionally abusive or mentally abusive, or of course physically abusive, that is unacceptable, of course. And we know that again through Islam, that is unacceptable. Everything has limits. However, normal jealousy, like for example, preferring your husband to not straddle someone on TikTok and post about it that's not you, that is perfectly natural to not feel comfortable about that. That is not weird at all. And we need to stop gaslighting each other and ourselves into saying that these feelings are toxic and these feelings are not normal. I think we need to take a step back as a society and start to redefine what does toxic really mean, because we've used that word so much to the point that it's just like beating a dead horse. Like it has no meaning anymore. We just use it to describe everything that we don't like pretty much. And we use it to describe perfectly normal, healthy feelings. And in fact, if you think about it, if we didn't have these feelings of jealousy whatsoever, like let's say jealousy is toxic, period. Okay, if you have absolutely no jealousy in a relationship, what does that actually look like? What would that really look like? Just take a second and reflect on that. Your husband isn't jealous no matter what you do. You hang out with a man alone, he doesn't care. You reveal yourself, he doesn't care. You go topless at parties or at the beach or whatever and show people intimate parts of your body, he doesn't care. You sleep with other people, he doesn't care. We have a word for that in Islam. And that is not a man of honor. Okay. We don't see that as a man with any kind of scruples or moral values. We also shouldn't see a man who forces his rules on his wife or a woman who forces her rules on her husband as scrupulous. We don't see that as valuable or that as, moral. Like that's the way we should approach it, is forcing ourselves. But the reality of the matter is, if you guys had mutual respect, if you really deeply cared for each other, respected each other, and loved each other, there would be no force needed. You wouldn't need it. Even if you didn't really agree with the boundary they were setting, you would be able to discuss it like adults and you wouldn't have to force it. You would either come to a compromise and start to understand each other's perspective, or one would realize the other was, actually had a better perspective on this and, maybe I didn't think about it correctly. That's what adults do. If you really respected each other, no force is needed. So, this whole idea that you shouldn't be forcing rules on your spouse, of course not. Of course, you shouldn't be. But the issue is that you think it's forceful to say, hey, please don't hang out with a partner. The issue is that you think it requires force to ask your partner to not hang out with someone of the opposite sex alone, to not reveal themselves to people of the opposite sex. If that requires force in your marriage or your relationship, that's a problem with your relationship. I'm sorry to say that, but like that is a problem. I'm not a relationship expert. I'm not even married, okay? I'm not sitting here giving anyone relationship advice. I'm just saying that's not normal. If you can't set healthy boundaries and have a discussion like an adult with your partner about what you expect and what you're not okay with, if they can't respect that, that is not normal. And that's a problem with your guys' relationship, not with society, not with the boundaries put on us. Because just to wrap it up, I think this is something we see more broadly, not just with this specific topic, but more broadly, we see this nowadays where it's like we see a fringe of society saying these things are okay. For example, you know, um, wearing revealing clothing or spending time with someone of the opposite sex alone when you're married. We see some people saying these things are okay. And there's two, there's these ideas at odds. There's the classic societal boundaries of no, those things are not okay. And then there's this fringe new age idea that no, these things are okay. And instead of saying, well, these are just our ideas and it's not really everybody's cup of tea and we understand we're in the fringe, nowadays what's become normal is to say, no, we have the moral high ground, we're the normal ones, and all of society has to change to abide by our rules, and you're toxic if you don't. It doesn't matter if thousands and thousands of years these have been the norms and it's worked out when people follow them appropriately. It doesn't matter that most places in the world still abide by these norms. It doesn't matter what you came from, doesn't matter what you believe. You're toxic if you don't abide by the fringe opinion. That's something I see happening quite a bit. And if you're Muslim in the West, I'm sure you can relate to that. I'm sure you've seen that happen as well. Even if you're not Muslim and you're not in the West, I'm sure you've seen it happening more and more nowadays. So I just feel that this is a real issue. And I think we need to take a step back as a society and say, what really does toxic mean? Is this behavior really toxic or is it actually quite normal? And furthermore, are my ideas in the fringe? Are my ideas only really something you would see in this day and age? And if so, that's okay, but maybe I shouldn't be forcing my ideas on other people and making them feel inferior or like there's something wrong with them if they don't abide by my ideas. I wish we would do that more in society. I think we would see a lot of growth. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Just basically reiterating the fact that Islam is the answer to our problems, both now and thousands of years ago when Islam came down to us. It's always been the answer. If we always just followed it, we wouldn't have these problems. We wouldn't see this craziness. We wouldn't see this craziness and we wouldn't see people normalizing things that are not normal. For real, like they're weird. That's weird. The things I talk about today, those are not normal things to be happening. And they don't have to be normal. You don't have to normalize these things. So I hope this was a reminder for you, if you're a Muslim, to not let society gaslight you and feel like your values are toxic. There's something wrong with you for having classic Islamic values that, again, have stood the test of time. Okay? There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, honestly, there's something wrong with them. So, again, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was a good reminder. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again very soon. Assalamu alaikum.